and welcome to Tess Talks Entirely Too Much, where I, your host Tess, will talk entirely too much. This is Frank. Frank is my emotional support co-host. He's here to make sure that I don't go completely off of my rocker. And if you stick around for a while, you'll see that I probably really do need someone to make sure I don't go completely off of my rocker. So, this is the first official episode of Tess Talks Entirely Too Much. I did an introduction video last week, kind of telling who I was and why I was doing this podcast, and just really talked too much. um, this episode is going to be a lot heavier, and this episode specifically is why I wanted to start this podcast. Um, like I said in my introduction, I have a lot of mental health issues. I have PTSD, which is actually probably CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I have literally a lifehood of trauma from before I was even born up until like current. So, yeah, I've tried to tell my story online and it just sharing in short form just wasn't it. It was, 20 something parts and it all just got too confusing and muddied up together. So I figured, why not just do a podcast where you can talk about it, talk about your life, talk about trauma, talk about all of the other things that you want to talk about, that you talk about anyways, um, that you talk about too much. And I can't remember if I said this in the introduction or not, but one of the reasons why I'm calling it Tess Talks Entirely Too Much is because I've always been told that I talk too much. I've always been told that I am too much, that I'm too sensitive, that I'm too dramatic, that I'm too this or that. And I am embracing that. It's like, if you say that I talk too much, then I'm just gonna start talking too much. I've also been told to keep things quiet, to keep things private, to keep things swept under the rug. And there are a lot of topics that I don't think need to be swept under the rug. I think that they need to be talked about. I think that they need to be put out there so that someone else going through the same thing doesn't feel like they're going through it alone. So, this week, we are talking about my PTSD story. I think I said that, but Um, trigger warning, it involves medical trauma, hospitals, blood work, IVs, passing out, all of the things. So if you're sensitive to that, then you don't want to watch this episode. Um, it's just, yeah. So we're just going to jump right into it because why not? On the night of January 31st, 2024, I had been working on my previous podcast, Blind Crime, and I had decided that to kind of help me relax a little bit because I was really stressed out, I was going to drink a glass of wine and write my script for the podcast. So that's what I did. I poured myself a glass of, I believe it was Arbor Mist, um, some type of white Moscato, and I drank a glass of wine. My stepdad had given me a bottle of another kind of Moscato that he wanted me to try. And so after I finished my cheap wine, I poured a glass of this other wine that my stepdad had given me. And I drank about half a glass of that wine. So, in all, a glass and a half. Um, so I was able to get my script written. I wasn't able to record because I could feel like the buzz a little bit. Um, and I remember it was, relatively early. I think it was like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. But I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna call it a night. Like I'm gonna go crawl in bed and just call it a night. And so that's what I did. I went and I got in bed. I took my usual pills. At the time, I was taking, I think it was Seroquel for sleep. I was on a beta blocker. I can't remember what the name of it was, but I was on a beta blocker. And then I was taking, I want to say it was 75 milligrams, or maybe it was 150 milligrams of venlafaxine, my antidepressant. So I took all of those at the same time every night, 9 o'clock. That's still the time that I try to take all of my pills at night. Um, and I remember thinking, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have taken the sleeping pill with the fact that I drank the wine, but I didn't think about it. And at the time of taking it, I no longer felt like that buzzed feeling. That had worked its way out of my system. Um, so I was laying in bed and just winding down finally, getting tired. But then I ended up having to get up and go to the bathroom. So I went and got up, went to the bathroom. And while I was using the bathroom, I started feeling like my blood sugar was super low. So I looked at my phone and checked my Dexcom, and I want to say that my blood sugar was, 115, 117, something like that. It was, it wasn't low. It was in a good spot. But I just felt like something in my body felt really, really, really wrong. Um, so I was like, well, maybe my Dexcom is off. So I went to the kitchen where I kept my finger prick kit, um, and was trying to get my test strips open so that I could actually do a finger stick and see what my blood sugar actually was. But I couldn't get the test strips open. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. Why, what is going on here? I need glucose. I need something because it's starting to really feel like I'm going to pass out. Um, so I had like tunnel vision. And I remember walking from my dining room table to the cabinet in the kitchen where I kept, um, I have like these little, I get them from Walmart. They're little like 2 or 4 ounces of liquid glucose. They're like little glucose shots. And that's what I'll use to treat my low blood sugars. And so I was able to get to the cabinet and get the glucose shot, and I twisted it open. And while I was twisting it open, I blacked out. And I woke up on the kitchen floor covered in liquid glucose. My phone was still on the counter, and it had been playing a YouTube short, something about an airplane. I think it had something to do with the Bermuda Triangle. So it was like playing on repeat. And I remember like sitting up enough to where I could reach my phone. I got my phone and I called my husband, who was at work. And I told him, I was like, I just passed out. My blood sugar, like Dexcom is saying my blood sugar is fine, but I can't, like, I passed out before I could do a finger stick. Um, and then while we were on the phone, I blacked out again. And I came to with him like yelling, Tess, Tess, wake up, Tess, Tess, wake up. Um, and I just remember telling him, like, call 911. Something's wrong, call 911. So he did. He works in a different town than the town that we live in. So whenever he called 911, it sent him to the dispatch for the city that he was in, and they had to transfer him to ours. Um, but he called me back and told me, that they were like, an ambulance was on the way, everything. But I was going to have to go and unlock the front door so that they could get in. And the way that our apartment was set up, the kitchen was like right off the hallway where the front door was. So it wasn't that far. But I had to like army crawl to the front door to get it unlocked and you know, brace myself up against the wall to get the door unlocked. And then I army crawled to the wall that the kitchen sink was at. It was almost like a bar top type of situation. So it was like a half wall, and I just like leaned up against that half wall and stayed there. And a few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I tried telling them to come in, but uh, they couldn't hear me. But they ended up coming in and they checked my blood sugar. My blood sugar, I think they said it was 105, so they didn't give me any additional glucose or anything. Um, my blood pressure, they were trying to check my blood pressure, but my dog, he was a yapper, and I had him shut in the bedroom. I was able to shut the bedroom door on my way to the wall that I was leaned up against. So he he was yapping and being loud, and they didn't have like a they had like the manual blood pressure cuff and everything, not the digital ones. Um, so they couldn't get like a real read on what my blood pressure was because they couldn't hear it because the dog was barking. Um, So they asked me if I wanted to go to the hospital, and I didn't want to go to the hospital, but I was freaking out because I had just passed out and it wasn't blood sugar related. So, like, what the hell was going on? Um, so some of them go back down to the ambulance to get the stretcher to bring back up. And I was wearing like a tank top and a pair of shorts. And uh, one of the EMTs was like, it's really cold out there. Can we get you some clothes that's something a little bit warmer that because you're going to freeze to death if you like trying to get you into the ambulance. And so I had to tell him, like, yeah, like I have sweatpants and like pajama pants and everything in this drawer, and I have like a jacket on the table that's at the foot of my bed. Just grab whatever. And then they had to like help me get dressed and everything. So they get me loaded up into the ambulance, and then they're able to get me hooked up to the like digital blood pressure cuff monitor. And they started an IV, which was painful, very painful. They started it in the top of my right hand, and it hurt immediately, and it didn't stop hurting. But we'll talk about that later. Um, so they were getting ready to like start rolling to the hospital, and I pass out again. And I want to say that one of them, as I was coming to, one of them said that my blood pressure was like 80 something over 54 or 54 over something. 54 was one of the numbers. I remember that much. So my blood pressure was really, really low. And I had told them that I had drank the wine and I had taken like my blood pressure medicine and everything and the sleeping pill. And they said that they didn't think that, a glass and a half, 2 glasses of wine would have, caused me to pass out. Um, you know, maybe if I'd had hard liquor, but not wine. So, but they said that it was probably my blood pressure medicine, the beta blocker that I had been taking. So I was like, great, that's great, awesome, um, totally awesome. So they get me to the hospital, and um, my mom was already there. She got there before I did. And then my husband was on his way to the hospital. It took him about 45 minutes or so to get down here, but he was almost at the hospital by the time I got to the hospital. Um, and, they like started doing the workup and everything, asking me what happened and everything. And it still felt like I was going to pass out again. Thankfully, I didn't, but it felt like I was going to. they hooked me up to like one of the heart monitors, not the Echo, but the one that you like have to keep on your person. I cannot remember what those things are called, but they did had like the sticky pads and everything all over. And I had the little thing that I had to keep on my person. So then they needed to do blood work. Of course, they always have to do blood work when you go to the emergency room. And I don't know if this girl was new or if she was just really bad at her job, but she could not get blood for anything. Now, granted, I was dehydrated. I'm kind of chronically dehydrated, and getting blood isn't always the easiest thing for me. I hate getting blood work done. I loathe getting blood work done. Getting blood work done is mortal enemy number one, always and forever. Mortal enemy number one. And I've had people and like phlebotomists say, well, what's the difference between getting blood work and getting tattoos and piercings? Because you've got tattoos and piercings. Okay, Karen, it's different because one, you don't ever actually see the tattoo needle, and it's so quick that you don't even really feel it. Getting a piercing is different because it's over in like 2 seconds. And then you have a piece of metal put in its place and it makes you look really cool. The difference is that when you get a tattoo or a piercing, they're not taking their little needle and sticking it underneath your skin and moving it all around up underneath your skin, trying to get the vein that they can't find. That's the difference. And feeling a needle moving around underneath your skin so they can like hit the vein, like you can feel it scratching and raking underneath your, I can't. Mm. Enemy number one, telling you. So there was that. They couldn't get blood. So they went to they decided to just flush my IV and take blood from where the EMTs had started the IV. And so that's what they did. Well, a few hours later, because you know that you're always in the ER for like ever. So a few hours later, the doctor comes in and is like, basically, I don't know how you're alive right now because you have no protein, no iron, no calcium, no potassium, and something else. I can't remember what the fifth thing was, but there were five things. And he was like, we're gonna have to admit you and give you stuff to bring these up, and you're gonna have to like it's gonna take several days for us to get your levels back up. But I don't see how I don't see how you're functioning. Um, and I was like, well, shit, I guess something really is wrong with me then. Okay, that's scary. Um, so they admit me, and a couple hours after that, they finally get me back into a room. So at this point, it is like 1:30 in the morning. And once I'm in the room and everything, and they've gotten me all done up and whatever, my mom decides to go back home since she knows that like I'm stable, at least in a place where if anything goes wrong, you know, they're supposed to help you, right? Uh, and then my husband, he he needed to go home so that he could get, you know, clothes, so he could get phone chargers, so he could get, you know, like I left without, you know, any of my diabetic supplies or anything like that. So he had to go home and do that, take care of the fur monsters. And I'd made him one of his favorite meals. And so like he was going to eat and take a shower and everything, and then come back with the stuff that we were going to need for a couple of days in the hospital. So that's what he did. Um, and so I was there by myself. And I was okay with that. I was like, I'm probably just going to go to sleep or try to sleep um, the best that I can, at least. Um, and then pretty much um, as soon as I was by myself, the lab came back into my room and said that they needed more blood. And I immediately started to like freak out, panic, hyperventilate, all of the things. Um, and I was I was in no place to mentally, physically, emotionally. I was in no place to have anything done to me. Um, but they said that they needed more blood, and I couldn't say no. So from 2 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the morning, they tried to get blood. A solid hour, they tried to get blood. And every spot that they poked, every vein that they tried to get, every artery that they shoved that needle into, uh, they couldn't they couldn't get blood. Um, they got sorry, they tried to get blood from the artery in my wrist, and that was excruciating. They tried they tried to get like right here, and then they tried to get up here. They tried to get right here on my wrist. I don't know why that zoomed in like that so bad for. Um, they tried, I want to say that they even tried like this part of my wrist. Of course, like in the crease of my elbow. Um, they tried to get the artery in my elbow. And what they didn't know at the time is that like I had a compressed ulnar nerve as well. So whenever they were trying to like do everything around my elbow, it was like causing even more pain. Um, and like they were pressing down on the artery, and that hurt so, so, so bad. They tried to get like the back of my arm, I think, at one point. Um, and the only vein that they could even like remotely see or feel in my right arm was the one that my IV was in. And I didn't understand, why didn't they just like flush the IV again and get blood from the IV if they needed it that badly? Um, but that's we're gonna find out why. We're gonna find out why in just a minute. Um, but they they spent a solid hour poking and prodding and pushing and trying to move my arteries around to where they could get blood out of them. You know, scraping the needle underneath my skin, and they didn't ask me if I needed a break. They didn't ask me if I needed to breathe. They didn't say, okay, obviously you are in like distress right now. We'll come back and try again. Um, they didn't give me an option to opt out. They didn't, um, like I said, immediately whenever they came in and said that they needed more blood, like, I started to panic as soon as she said that, and that should have been enough for them to say, "Okay, like, let's wait just a few minutes. Let's give you a few minutes to calm down, and then we'll try." But they didn't. They just kept on and 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 kept on for a solid hour. And, I remember so clearly watching the clock. It's like that's the only thing that I could focus on was the clock and watching each minute tick by. And at one point, I did like turn my head. I turned my head and looked over at the window, and it was like I was seeing myself from across the room, watching myself. And in that moment, I knew that I had detached from myself to survive that moment because of just how, like, I already had the fear of having blood drawn and having blood work done. But then, like, the physical pain that came with it, with them, like, trying to get the arteries and, like, having to press down on everything and, like, getting around those nerves and, like, with the combination of my ulnar nerve and everything, it was just it was too much, and I had to completely pull myself out of my own body to survive it, um, and like it was excruciating in every single way. Every part of that night just it is seared into my memory, it is seared into my brain, and it has taken me over 2 years to even be able to talk about it without going into, like, a full-blown panic attack. Um, but that is what that is what traumatized me. That is what caused my PTSD, was blood work in simple in simple terms. And I know a lot of people have thought that I was being overdramatic, that I was, making things worse, exaggerating. But you weren't there and you weren't the one that had to go through it. And I would find out I would find out later that I shouldn't have even had to have gone through it at all because when they took the blood from my IV, it was diluted with saline from the IV. And that's why all my levels came back so low. I was fine. I was actually totally fine. There was nothing wrong with me. But because they screwed up and they didn't catch that the blood work was diluted until afterwards, and they didn't think, this doesn't look quite right. Um, this doesn't look quite right. Why are these levels are too low? This doesn't look quite right. Um, they could have they could have come back into the ER and told me like, "Hey, the blood work that we got from your IV, it was diluted with saline. We need to try to get blood from somewhere else. Do you think that like do you think we can try to do that?" And I would have been like, well, I mean, if it's diluted, then like, yeah, I mean, I hate getting blood work done, but like, whatever. You know, but like, whatever. Um, but they didn't catch it. They didn't notice it. They just saw the results and thought, oh my God, how is she even alive? We need to give her all of these medications to get her levels back up. And it's like they had put me on like a calcium drip and given me like potassium and all that kind of stuff. And like, um, that ended up shooting my levels up too high. And that's why I was admitted. And that's why they kept me for 3 fucking days, was because of their mistake in the lab. Um, and because I had passed out, the room that I was in, it was like a monitored room. So there was a camera in the room, and my bed had an alarm on it. So if I got out of my bed with uh without someone being in the room, like the bed would like go off and alert, like make an alarm. Um so I couldn't even like get up and go to the bathroom by myself. I had to have someone in there with me. Um I couldn't stand up, I couldn't stretch, I couldn't do anything. I just had to sit there the entire 3 days that I was in there. They did do, like, an ultrasound on, like, my carotid arteries to make sure that there wasn't any blockages or anything to make, like, and maybe that's why I had passed out. Um, but that was the only thing that they did about that, and they didn't do anything, um, they didn't do anything else for it. They just kept me there, and by the 3rd day, I remember sending a text to my mom, and I told her, I was like, "If they don't tell me that I get to go home today, then I'm leaving against medical advice, like, and I will make an appointment with my primary care doctor, and he'll be able to tell me what's wrong within, like, 5 minutes." Like, um, and thankfully, they let me leave on that 3rd morning. Um, and they never had an answer for why I passed out. Um, Never had an answer. So, in the aftermath of that, when I got home, I remember just sitting down on my couch and finally getting a good cup of coffee. Um, I just remember sitting down on my couch and thinking, like, I'm never gonna be the same. My life is never gonna be the same again. Like, something in me changed so drastically and so dramatically, and I knew I was never gonna be able to just bounce back from what had happened. Um, I did make an appointment with my primary care doctor, and it was, like, I think 2 weeks was the soonest I could get in with him, but I took it because I knew, like, I needed some kind of answers. Um, and that entire 2 weeks was just, like, absolute hell because I still didn't know why I had passed out, and I had been through this, like, ridiculously traumatic experience, and, I just remember being so terrified of everything, and, like, my body, like, my entire body was, like, on a high alert, and it's like it was literally, like, every surface of my body was scanning for something wrong to send off a red flag, and I was so anxious, and I've always had anxiety. I've always had anxiety ever since I can remember. I have had anxiety, but my anxiety was never physical. It was always mental. It was always in my head. Um, but the physical anxiety that came, it made my chest hurt, like physically hurt. And I remember being so terrified because my chest hurt. It was like, I'm having a heart attack. Like I'm having a heart attack and I'm gonna die. Like my heart's gonna stop. And it just it was terrifying. Um so I was finally able to see my primary care doctor, and just like I said, I knew that he was gonna be able to tell me what was wrong in 5 minutes. And he did. I explained what happened. And I remember I was so, I was very, um, what's the word I'm looking for here? Most of the time, whenever I would see my primary care doctor, I was really super friendly and, just really like, I don't know, I was like more shy and reserved and everything. But, like this time, it's like I wasn't mean, I don't think. Um, but I remember telling him, like, yeah, they need to learn down there not to spend a freaking hour trying to draw blood. Like they're lucky that I'm not suing their asses or something like that. It's like I said something along those lines. And he like I just remember his face. It was like, okay. Like I don't think that he had ever seen me like that before. Uh Angry and like, maybe a little bit defiant almost. I don't really know what the word is, but I remember that. But it was the beta blockers. It was my blood pressure that had dropped too low, and that's why I passed out. And so he took me off my beta blocker and put me on a different blood pressure medicine. And then, like, almost or a little over a year later, almost the exact same thing happened, and ended up back in the emergency room. But this time I wasn't admitted. Um, and they said that it was probably my blood pressure. Um, And after that, I came off blood pressure medicine altogether, and I haven't had to take it since. So, um, that much is good, that's a plus. But it it was awful. Um, so after seeing my primary care doctor and, getting off or like changing the blood pressure medicine and everything, my anxiety, I was hoping that it would lessen, but it didn't. And it stayed heightened and it stayed physical. It didn't go back to being mental. And it was awful. Um, the way that I describe it is I was in a constant state of hyper panic. So I was so, um, like, I never came out of that hyper aware mode of what's going on with my body. How does my body feel? If the slightest thing felt off, then I would think that I was going to pass out. And then I would have a panic attack. And, um, something from something as little as like having a slight headache, um, to having, like a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar, or like anytime my body did anything, if it felt just the slightest bit off in any way, um, and then I would have these moments where the only way that I can describe it is like it felt like my head just went like whoosh, but like on the inside, it's like my brain just like like it was in a fishbowl, and like someone shook the fishbowl and my brain was like flopping around in the fishbowl. And whenever that would happen, like I freaked out, and um I couldn't I couldn't sleep. I couldn't go about my days as normal anymore. Um, Everything revolved around how I felt and what my body was doing, and if I felt normal or not. I It got to where I couldn't even take my dog outside because I was so terrified that I was going to pass out again, and end up back in the hospital again. I have to get the blood work again. So I couldn't even take my dog outside, and I couldn't walk to the mailbox. I couldn't leave my house. And if I did leave my house, then I would panic every single time. And these panic attacks, like I said, my anxiety before was always internal. It was always in my head. My anxiety after this hospital stay, my anxiety became so physical, and it is still to this day so, so, so physical. So these new panic attacks, they would start with like this rush, this wave, um, that started like at the bottom of my feet and would like brush up to my knees and then my hips and then up into my stomach and like up my arms and torso until it like got to my neck and chin and face, and um like I would it felt like fire coming up through my body, um which I later learned was like an adrenaline rush. It was like adrenaline. It was like a flush of adrenaline. Um, and I would have to curl up in like the fetal position, literally curl up in the fetal position on my bed and just grip onto the covers or my pillow or something. And like I would cry, I would hyperventilate, um, I couldn't move, and these panic attacks would last for sometimes they would last for hours. They were not over within a few minutes. They would last for hours. Um, and I remember thinking one night my husband was home. I wasn't home by myself. He was in the shower and I was laying in bed, and I started to get like that rush feeling, that fire feeling. And I remember thinking like, Tess, you're fine. Like, what is your deal? You're not by yourself. Like, what is wrong with you? And I just knew that something was still very, very wrong. Um, I couldn't, I began to pull away from everything and everyone, and um I just became so hollow inside and so the only thing that I could manage to do most of the time was, like, sit and play games on my phone. That's the only thing that I could do. I couldn't do anything else, and I thought about this earlier today, and, like, I after the hospital, I remember deciding I wanted to watch The Good Doctor because it was on Hulu, and I know that I watched the entire series, um, but I don't remember a single thing about it. I couldn't tell you anything about the show, um, because I was still in, like, you know, trauma. I was still in the depths of trauma. Um, the littlest things would set me off, like I said, having a headache or a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar, uh, feeling dizzy in any way, shape, or form, getting too hot or getting too cold, having anything on my wrist. I mean, even to this day, I still can hardly wear anything on my wrists. Um, I I stopped. I ended up s- um, pulling away from my church and, like, disconnecting from my faith in a lot of ways. Um, my friendships became they were all put on the back burner. My marriage, um, I just I wasn't there anymore. There was nothing there was nothing in me anymore. So 3 months later, I had a follow-up appointment with my primary care doctor, and I was telling him, like, I still feel like something is really, really wrong. I still feel like, I just get this wave that washes over me, and, I feel like I'm going to pass out or throw up or both or something. And, like, I just know that something is really, really wrong with me. And, like, I'm scared all the time. And I, just telling him all of these things. And I remember he looked at me and, like, seriously, he said it in such a serious way, but in such, like, a calm way. Um, he asked if I thought that I might have PTSD, and, I just remember thinking, like, "You just said the words out loud that I was too embarrassed to say," because I thought that PTSD was just for, military people and, first responders and stuff, not, not someone who had a bad experience getting blood work done. And so for him to say that and ask me that, and do so in the way that he did, validated it validated what I was feeling and what I was thinking and where I was. And, he was always so amazing about, like, my mental health in general and, like, took everything about my mental health so seriously. And if it wasn't for that, and the way that he treated me and my mental health struggles, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here today. Um, but to have him, like, validate and say ask, "Do you think you might have PTSD?" Um, I felt so seen and so, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. It felt real. It felt legitimate. It almost felt like hope in a way, even though I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel hope. Um, and so we talked about different options of like what would be the best way to go about it. Um, and he suggested, and we agreed on like doing a therapy focused treatment since I was already on antidepressants. He didn't want to put me on like mood stabilizers on top of that. So I found a therapist that focused on PTSD and trauma and stuck with her for, about 9 months. But then at the end of 2024, she told me, she was like, I think that talk therapy has done as much as it's going to do for you. And she recommended that I find someone who do EMDR therapy. And so that's what I did. In January of 2025, I started with a new therapist doing EMDR, and it has been absolutely amazing. Um, and I still had really bad panic attacks despite doing the EMDR. And it got to the point where I actually ended up back in the ER because of one of my panic attacks. And after that, I asked my doctor, I was like, is there something that you can prescribe me that will help with the panic attacks because they are so bad? And he prescribed me a very low dose of Xanax to take as needed, um, whenever I would have whenever I would have a panic attack. Um, but the anxiety was still so bad, and I was still in such a state of survival mode that it got to where, like, we had to up my dose and take it more preemptively. Um, I I need a minute. So I was taking the Xanax, just as needed for panic attacks up until August of 2025, and then in August of 2025, I had a lot kinda stack up all at one time. Um, the little yapping dog that I mentioned earlier that the paramedics couldn't hear my heartbeat over, uh, I had to make the very difficult decision to have him put to sleep, and he had been in my life for almost 14 years, and he was my baby. He was my everything, and I had to say goodbye to him at the end of July of 2025. And then, at the same time, both of my eyes, um, both of my eyes bled, and I'll talk more about that in a later episode. but the back of my eyes will sometimes fill with blood and cause me to go temporarily blind. And so I was, grieving the loss of my dog, and my eyes had bled, and like I was still in this survival mode place, and I was just not okay. And I wanted, I just wanted it all to stop. And I ended up um, having to reach out for serious help because I I had decided that I was just gonna take all of my sleeping pills and all of my Xanax and just go to bed and not wake up. Uh, I didn't. I didn't. I I called my husband at work and I told him, and he came home, and I talked with the crisis hotline, and I immediately messaged my therapist and told her I needed like an emergency appointment, and I already had an appointment scheduled with my doctor. And but I sent him a message and told him, I know that this is what our appointment next week is supposed to be like, but this is what's going on right now. And would really like to know why my brain is trying to kill me. And so after that, like, we upped my Xanax doses and how many times a day I take it. And that was the first time. Uh, that was the first time in over a year that I felt somewhat okay. It wasn't back to normal. It wasn't back to me, but I felt somewhat okay. Um, and I've been on that routine ever since then. And I finally feel normal. I finally feel stable. I finally feel settled. Um, I still have bad days. I still have days where I have flashbacks. I have days where the physical discomforts trigger the panic. I still have panic attacks. I still struggle sometimes to leave the house. Still, I still can't wear anything on my wrists. Um, I hate having anything like around my chest from where those little like sticky pads were. I'm really sensitive to adhesives. And so whenever I got home after having those adhesives on, I had like welts all over my chest where those little sticky pads were. Um, and so I hate having anything on my chest. Um, anything that um I hate going to the doctor now. Um, the only doctor that I was comfortable with after the hospital was my primary care doctor. It was the only place that I felt safe at. Um, And up until my last one of my last appointments with this doctor, like, I had never had a panic attack at his office, and I'd had a panic attack at everybody else's office. Um, and I hated that he had to see me in panic mode because I had worked so hard. Um, I'm still working hard to get even better because I'm not there yet. Um, but there was nothing left inside of me after what happened to me. I was I was so broken. I was so shattered. I was so just I was in pieces. And it was the kind of mess that you look at and you just want to scream because you don't know how in the hell you're going to pick the pieces up, clean up the mess. But because of my doctors and because of my therapist and because of medications and because of music, I have been able to rebuild myself and make myself into the person that I've always wanted to be. And I hate that it took trauma to make me this person. But I am so thankful for where I am today. I look at myself now and I am so proud because now I know that I am brave. I know that I'm strong. I know that I have a voice. I know that my voice has power. I know that when I say something, it has weight. When I do something, it has meaning. When I walk into a room, there's a reason why I'm there. Um, I have let go of the person who wants to please everyone. I have let go of the person who gives a fuck what people think about her. I've let go of the girl who thought she was never good enough for anyone or anything. I've let go of every version of myself that I tried to make myself be that wasn't me. And the person that you see here today, right now, this is the person that this is who I was meant to be. I am a force to be reckoned with. I am 5'2", but I have the attitude of someone who is 6'7". I am covered in tattoos and piercings. I listen to what I call my scary, screaming music all of the time. I am weird. I'm creepy. I like all of the odd things. I think that the rain is the most beautiful thing in the world. I love foggy mornings. I love the darkness. I love skulls and human hearts and human brains and slasher films and bloody eyeballs. I love bloody eyeballs. I don't like having bloody eyeballs, but I like to see bloody eyeballs. I have taken everything that has happened to me and I have turned it into something. They say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I have to agree with that, but you have to let it. You have to decide to let it make you stronger. You can sit and you can wallow in your pain and in your misery, and it's okay if you do that. It's okay if you do that. I'm not criticizing you if that's where you are right now. But at some point, you're going to have to decide, are you going to let this be all you ever are? Or are you going to take what you've been through and use it to make yourself into something because of it, in spite of it? Are you going to let this be the roadblock that stops you, or are you going to let it be the catalyst that sends you into the next era of your life? I had to make that choice, and I almost made the wrong one. But when I decided to make something of my pain and my hurt and my brokenness, that's where I found myself, my true self, the truest, purest, realest version of me that I have ever been. And I am so much happier now. I am so much more confident now. That's like, I say, I will tell people, you can say it all you want to, but you can't make me believe that I'm not the hottest part of the fire. Like, because it's true. I don't just mean like physically attractive, but I mean, I do think I'm physically attractive. That's, but that's not all that I'm referring to. It's like when you've literally walked through hell and you've danced in the flames, you learn to like take on the heat that they emit, and then you use it and you become part of you become part of the fuel. You become part of what sustains the fire itself. And I don't know. I don't know who I would be if it hadn't have been for the things that I've been through. I wouldn't be who I am today. I know that much. And I no longer miss the person that I was before the trauma because of how much I love who I am now. And it has taken so long to get here. Like I said, this happened at the end of January in 2024. And it is now the beginning of June 2026. So it's been over 2 years. And it has really just been the past 6 or so months that I have really, really seen a change in myself and have been able to come out of that survival mode and feel stable and feel secure. And like I said, there are still days I still have panic attacks. I had 2 panic attacks in a row a week or so ago, but I don't know if I will ever live without the presence of PTSD. I think that that is something that is always going to walk alongside me. I think that what I can do, what I have to do, what I've chosen to do is not fight against it, but to allow it to walk beside me throughout life. And I know that may sound kind of crazy in a way, but that's just what I have to do for myself. It's not that I'm holding on to it. It's not that I refuse to let go of it. Um, but I know that it's part of my story. It's part of why I am who I am. It's part of how I got to this point in my life. And I I don't want to know who I would be without it because like I've said, I love who I am now. There's so much more that I could say. There's so much more I could talk about. And I'll get around to it at some point. I will share the other parts of my story. This one, uh, I just really needed to get this out there so that someone out there won't feel as alone in their journey. So if you've stuck around and watched all of this, thank you. I appreciate it so very, very much. If this was your first time seeing me, welcome. You just got trauma dumped, but I hope that you found it insightful. Um, if you are struggling with any type of mental health, anything, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to talk to your doctors, to talk to a friend, a family member, somebody. If you are in a crisis mode, reach out to the crisis hotline at 988. You can call or text. You're not alone. You're not doing this alone. It's hard. It feels like you're never going to get through it. It feels like there's never going to be a day when anything feels good again. But I promise you, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen. You just have to keep hanging in there. So, thank you again for watching. If you feel so inclined, feel free to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss another episode. Not every week is going to be this heavy. I don't know what we're going to be talking about next week. I haven't decided yet, but it's going to be much lighter than this, I can assure you. Thank you so much again, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You're here for a reason. So, I hope you feel a little less alone now. Until next time. I got to think of a good tagline to end it with. So we'll see you guys next week.